All right, box squatting. A lot of people love them. A lot of people hate them. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Logan. I'm gonna be like asking questions. I'm playing
So I mean,
third role.
Yeah, start us off, Logan.
here's what I think. I've used them, but just sparingly. I think they're a great tool, great movement, but it's got to fit. It's got to fit with what you're trying to do. I mean, if it doesn't fit, then I mean, I don't know. There's not a
So when would you say like is a good time that you'd have them fit? Like, what does that mean?
well, like if you're like for me, when I've used them, especially in like team setting or group setting or coaching athletes, when I've used them, it's when like I'm really trying to hammer home technique. And if I'm trying to introduce like back squat to them, we did them in Omaha, a little bit.
Yeah,
But like
or like a depth gauge, but
yeah. Well, depth, yeah, and depth. But I would say I haven't done them probably in 3 years in training.
with teams, you mean?
Teams, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've reverted to. I started doing more stuff on a slant board, like high bars. We're doing high bars squat,
Yeah.
and then we're doing stuff on a slant board, pass parallel with depth, ton of tempo work, like that sort of thing.
Super light technique.
Super light,
Seems like
What would be like the number one reason people use it?
what would be the number one
Or is
reason?
it like a multifaceted tool that you can use for different purposes throughout like a training block?
I mean, I think you can use them for a bunch of reasons, but like, especially like the West Side community there, which is a lot of people like that's like, if they say they're squatting, that's how they're squatting. Like there's no like squatting without really, unless it's a competition. It's like they squat to them in training and then they usually go to competition and break whatever they've done in training, break their record at the competition.
Mhm.
But like a lot of them, like Logan said, like I think, yeah, for technique for sure is huge.
Okay.
But then like,
So keep going. Sorry.
oh, I mean, I just think it's huge for technique. And then like my mind goes to like, if it's good for technique, then like, why would I want to get away from them? But like, then like him with the slant board, it's like, that might just be, you can use that style for different purposes too. It's like, kind of like what he said at the beginning. It's like when you might choose to use a box for a different reason than a slant board, or like you might use a box style squat at the beginning and then elevated squat later on for a different reason too.
Right. So you say like it's proper technique. What's like maybe we should kind of lay the groundwork of like what is a proper box squat?
Yeah,
'Cause
especially
you see it butchered everywhere.
yeah.
Well,
That's,
I mean,
that's
what's
the
a
thing.
proper
That's
box
the
squat?
thing.
you could really do it wrong.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing.
So what's a proper box squat? Explain that.
Well, that's the thing, because I think that's the whole problem. It's like people like, they say, well, box squatting is terrible. It's like, no, like terrible box squats are terrible. Like that's not, but so are everything else, like those, every squat is terrible when it's bad, poorly done. Every squat's good when it's done correctly. But like, I think a lot of the things that I've seen, it's like people talk, you want to minimize, which is kind of opposite today, but like you minimize like the anterior shift of the knee. So you want to keep the shin as vertical as possible. That's the point of using that box. Like, especially like, he talked about again and like use it as a technique builder.
Yeah.
Well, a big problem people have is like getting into the pattern of the squat. And so teaching them to sit onto an object, like that's learning 101. Like they have a target, sit to it, then they can figure it out as they go. And then you can build on that from there. But yeah,
Right.
I think the main thing, like, especially with that box and like with Logan, like with basketball guys, like those guys are going to have to lean over a little bit more. So that's where like a whole bunch of different things come in too. Like, and it just depends on what it's worth to you.
And do they teach a vertical shin because they want more like a hip shift backwards?
Yeah. So it's all about
just for the
moving
pure
weight.
purpose of like moving as much weight as possible.
Both. I mean, it's like they want to move as much weight as possible, which most people should, depending on where you're training and stuff. But like to sit back, that's to use the proper musculature in the squat. That's where your glutes, hamstrings come most into play. So like they hammer, sitting way back, things like that.
Right.
I mean, like in my world, I mean,
Yeah, this is
the shortest guy I train is 6'5".
yeah, exactly.
And so, and the tallest guy I train is 7'2". So I'm dealing I'm in a environment where like patella tendonitis is like this. It's like this huge. It's a huge deal, especially with the sport. It's high acceleration, high deceleration, and plyometric and short ranges of motion. And so, like what I have done in the last few years is just really converted my bilateral movements to past 90, like full range of motion, and used like tempo work and that sort of
super anterior dominant almost.
Mm-hmm.
yes, to almost to help alleviate that issue. And for the most part we have. I mean, I had a kid last year on the at Utah, and the year prior he couldn't even practice because his patella tendonitis was so bad.
Yeah.
And it just debilitated him. So when I got here, we started with goblet squat or bodyweight squat.
Correct.
And we just kept hammering that motor pattern. And he never had an issue the entire year. And the year prior, he couldn't even practice. So, I mean, so that's kind of why I've gone so far down that.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
So how concerned are you like during the period now of adding a bunch of weight to their squat?
I'm not.
Yeah, see that. Which that's the thing. And like, like you talked about like tendonitis, like if somebody has real bad tendonitis, like step one is you some sort of like super anterior dominated squat. So a slant board, staying super vertical. So like, and you and I talked about this the other day, Logan. It's like, when we started talking about the box and stuff like that, it's like, well, are those kids ever going to lift like super maximally or train, like all year round? Like it's not the same. It's a different context, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
not to say that it's bad or, right or wrong.
That's what I'm saying.
It doesn't matter as much.
It's got to fit. It's got to fit. If you're going to use it, it's got to fit.
Yeah.
And for me, it doesn't fit. So, and I'm not really trying really hard to make it fit either.
Well, no.
I'm sure I could find a situation or a way to insert it into my periodization, but I haven't. I've gone, like I said, I've gone the other way with my bilateral movements. So.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So like, what if you were to use them, like you haven't really found or like looked for a reason to use them, what would be the reason? Now that you've went away from it, like, would there be a reason to go back?
I mean, I would probably, if I was doing like more, so I do all of our back squat stuff is all high bar. It's all Olympic style. Like if I move to more of a low bar squat and enforce that with the collective whole, if I was trying to push a ton of weight on the back squat, then yeah. But like you got to think about my population as well.
Right.
It's not, that's not in my population.
Yeah.
So, I mean, last year here, so new group of kids, new team, new school. Like we didn't even back squat until the fall. So we spent the whole summer front squatting just because we had to learn how to squat properly.
Right.
And there's such a disposition with levers and putting the bar on their back that I'm just causing them low back problems and because we're not doing it right, and we can move more weight. They can physically move more weight. But if you do a front squat position, it's all dependent on their upper back. And if the upper back is strong enough, so they can't hold the posture, they can't do the squat. So we're staying lighter. But then, like I said, I manipulate some of the intensity with tempo and obviously sets and reps and all that stuff and how we want to do it. So
Yeah. See, I was, and we've talked about this before, or all three of us have talked about this before, but it's like, especially in college or like high school, knowing the groups is super important. Like I wouldn't have people box squat if I don't think they're going to listen. Not that they don't listen, but it's like if I have a big group of a team and they're not going to listen, I ain't doing it. Even if I think it's the best thing ever, I'm not doing it because it's just it can be a disaster. Like that's when you get into people say, "Oh, I box squat, it hurt my back." Well, yeah, of course, because they were doing it terribly.
yeah, I mean, if you're going down, well, one, if you don't have the right equipment, like what
Yeah.
kind of boxes?
That too.
Like,
Yeah.
like what?
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm talking about guys anywhere from, I'm not talking about a powerlifting population. Everybody's 6'2". Like it's literally, I have a guard. I've had guards in like that 6 foot, and I've had, centers above 7 foot. And I've had multiple on one team. So it's like, well, what kind of equipment do I have?
Yeah.
Well, we just have the basic. Here's our 24-inch box, our 18-inch box, and our 12-inch box. And then I'm trying to constantly figure out how to adjust it and put plates underneath them and do all this stuff to make sure that it's the right,
It's a huge pain.
and teach them how to do that. Well, I've got 45 minutes to train the group, and I just spent 10 of it trying to get them to figure out what box height they need.
Mhm.
And so it's just, sometimes
It's not practical.
it doesn't fit. It's not practical. It doesn't fit. Where I can throw a
Yeah.
board out, say, hey, we're doing front squat. You're squatting past parallel, and everybody knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And we just roll into it.
Anything else, Nick?
I don't think so on the box squat.
I talked to Logan about this too, and I think this is interesting. Like when I first started, it was like, oh, the vertical shin thing is super bad. Like you don't want, just let them, squat forward, things like that. But like I was listening to some stuff over the past couple of weeks, and they talked about, well, like, yeah, you can get, or he used an example of like Olympic lifters. Like Olympic lifter will train, for that cycle, go to Olympics, get a medal, and they're done for. Knees are destroyed, backs are destroyed. And like the people I've listened to, it's like for longevity purposes, they, not the box squat, but the box style of squat where you're sitting back farther, shins are more vertical, is probably better for longevity purposes, especially when you're lifting significant weight.
I was going to
Well,
say,
I mean,
would it depend on intensity for that though?
Yeah, I
Most
mean,
likely, but-
I've changed my style personally. Just talking with you, like,
Yep.
I moved to a low bar, more vertical shin
Yep.
versus what I was doing prior. Because I mean, my knees are beat up and my back's beat up, obviously.
Exactly.
But the thing there too is we're talking about Olympic lifters, and it's their sport is how much weight can you lift.
Yeah.
And the technique doesn't matter. Like you don't get all white lights if your technique was good.
Yeah.
It's you get it if you know what I'm saying. Like if the bar on your clean,
They have to get the bar from the floor overhead.
was an inch further away on the pole than what they deemed like the most appropriate. Like it's not a failed lift, catch it and jerk it. So it's like, again, that sport is about how much weight can you lift regardless of what it looks like. Now you have to be efficient, but like still the main goal is lift as much as possible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like everything, it's like Olympic lift. There's an ideal or optimal technique to get the bar from the floor to the rack to the overhead or whatever. So it's like it just takes whatever it requires, and whatever you have to do to get in that spot doesn't matter. So if you're super tall, you ain't gonna last because it just doesn't work.
Unless you're heavy as shit.
Yeah,
You can move
you
a
can just
lot of weight.
power it.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to shift too and talk a bit about, like we've talked quite a bit about team training, and then to continue,
Mhm.
like we've all coached, like how do you know, like if you see something that somebody's doing, like how do you know if, like what is your filter to decide if things are going well or not going well? Like if you just see a group training, like what kind of things stand out as like good training?
Good training. Like if you walked into a weight room and just saw a group going, this is how I view this. and I always told my staff this when I was a director, that if anybody could walk in there, it doesn't matter if they're an administrator, if they're a donor, if they're the equipment manager, it doesn't matter. If they should be able to walk in the room like, oh, that looks good. Like they should just be able to watch the session, see the session, and be like, that looks good, and have no idea. They don't necessarily have to have any knowledge of training or weightlifting or anything.
Yeah.
The qualities that I deem important to make somebody say that is the room is functioning and moving efficiently and properly. It's just not chaos. Coaches are coaching, and they're coaching really hard. The athletes are coaching each other and coaching hard. And then everything's has a pace and has a purpose, and it's just not it's just not stagnant or chaotic. That's how I deem that.
Nick.
So this one I thought was kind of a hard question too, because it's like hard to explain. I'm going to take the other route, and it's like,
Talk about it.
I'm going to address like what I see and like if I think it's bad. Like if I walk into a room, so Logan kind of said like what he wants in like a good environment. But like when I walk into a room, and it's kind of like you just said, it's like chaos. But to me, it's when I see a bad group or like a bad run, not efficiently run strength program, it's you walk in and it looks like chaos, but it just looks like there's zero standards being upheld. The coach is just kind of, I don't know, maybe he's on his phone, maybe he's talking to someone else, but he just kind of gives them the freedom when they haven't earned it, and they don't really know what's going on, and they might have some questions. They might be all over the place. You got one group doing one thing, a group doing a completely different thing because they don't know, and the coach isn't upholding like any standards or any kind of like basic rules of like how to flow through a lift. And to me, it's just kind of like, what does the coach allow to happen under his belt, like while he's in there? And if you kind of see just ho-hum training, like you could see like people breathing hard and sweating hard and doing like things that don't really make sense. Or you could come in and people aren't just doing the same thing and they're all over the place. And I just think that, you know, if you have a coach that's not really into it, not holding up any standards, like I said, I just think that's when I would come in and say like, this is kind of piss poor. Because I'd want to see at least something. Like Logan said, you want people to come in and be like, oh, this is good stuff. So it's like, I don't know if that like fully answers the question, but it's just, to me, it's just kind of like,
well, yeah, you have to have it's very evident. It's very evident if you are holding a group to a certain standard, whether it's like, it would just talk about squat depth, since we just talked about box squat. Let's talk about squat depth. If you got one guy squatting pass parallel, one guy quarter squatting, one guy doing high bar, one guy doing low bar, you know, whatever. If it's all over the place in a single session, or you got guys, how do they unrack the bar? How do they rack the bar? How do they?
I was thinking Olympic lifts, because I was like, what if you put in hang clean? You got some dudes doing clean pulls. You got some dudes doing power clean. You got some dudes doing like a hang off. Like you just, everything's different and it don't matter.
What are you getting ready to say?
Say it, Mike.
Well, no, and me and you talked about this, Logan. Like especially like any sort of team-based setting, it's like, well, like as a strength, it's like we're one of, you know, the stat, whatever. So it's like some of these are like systemic team issues. Like, you know, if a team sucks, they just suck. Like,
right.
Not that you shouldn't fix it, but again, sometimes it's like whatever. But I think like we talk about this a lot, Logan. It's like we never, you know, like it's hard to like judge something, especially like today, like social media, you see it. It's hard to judge it because it's like you have no clue like what the head coach is telling that person. Like I was listening to something the other day and they're like, yeah, like, you know, winter conditioning, whatever, like head coach has a lot of influence. And it's like, well, that's the worst case scenario to like develop a team. But you have no clue unless, you know, you've been in it a while and you know what kind of stuff goes on or you've experienced that. Yeah. But I was going to add, like along those lines, I think Joe Ken said it, and I stole this a long time ago. He said, like, if you walk in, like if I walked into like Utah's weight room, I should be like, everyone shouldn't look the same, but they should all be trying to do the same things. It's
Right.
like if you're,
Well, yeah.
like if you're squatting and everybody's squatting, everybody, like some of the positions are going to be different, like based on individual, but like everybody should be trying to accomplish the same thing. So like, like depth, touching the chest with the bench, like chin ups are getting locked out. Everyone's like attempting to try. And some kids, like, they're not as strong or they're stronger, and it's going to be a little different, but they're not
Or
like
the turds.
walking. Yeah. There's not like, the bottom feeders off in the corner looking out the window. Like, like everybody's not, that's more of like a work ethic thing, but as far as like lifting, it's like, there's an approach to the lift that like, they know, like my coach taught me to unrack the bar and take 2 steps out. Like they're not walking and screwing around and like doing whatever they want. Like there's some sort of order as to how they approach what they do.
I'd say it's less about content. And that's kind of what I was getting at. Like,
Yeah.
equipment manager walked in and knows nothing about strength and conditioning, nothing about training. Like they're not gonna look at the content and be able to make a judgment, but they could look at how the session is operating.
Yeah. So what are some things, like what are like 2 or 3 things that like an equipment manager or an academic advisor could walk in and be like, oh, this looks like it's going well, or not?
I mean, you can feel the intensity of the room.
Yeah.
That's a big one in my opinion. So like, I mean, obviously the coach drives the intensity, but the athletes uphold it. So, if that's kind of what I'm getting at with like the athletes are ultimately responsible and for some coaching as well.
Yeah.
And so my guys, if you came into the room tomorrow and watched the squat, like they would be talking to each other, helping each other with depth, helping each other with weight changes, communicating on what the next exercise is, or helping each other out in that regard. Or if if I was coaching the group and I was saying like global things to the whole group, then they would reinforce them on the side to each other. So like that's going to uphold the overall intensity of the session. But if you walked in the room and it was just, there's guys over here, they're doing something, they're squatting, and then one guy's sitting on the bench while the other guy squats.
Oh yeah.
Engaged with each other. The coaches aren't engaged with the athletes. Like you smile, but you've seen those sessions.
Oh.
And so like,
Hundreds.
so it's like, I don't know, I got a picture sent to me a while back of a coach on the floor on his phone, leaned over a bar while the whole team was doing front squat.
See, and this is my thing.
Nice.
And so it's like,
Well, but this is the thing, and even with the phone thing, just the phone example, it's like, hey, do you mind if I use my phone to film? Yes, I do mind. I don't want, because it doesn't matter what you're doing with it. It just, if you walk in and see that, oh, there's Billy filming the team. No, like you do something else.
Yeah.
Like if you have time to get on your phone and film, it's like, well, I don't know.
Hey man, you got to put it out on a social media though.
Yeah, and it's whatever, but I just don't care.
if you're not on social media, you're not relevant.
Yeah, true. To add to these points, like one thing that I always told teams, I'd say like, all right, like this is week 2. I should be like, for the rest of the year, I should be able to set the cards down and go in the office and watch you just train on your own. It shouldn't matter. Like you shouldn't have to be out there. None of us. Like
my absolute favorite thing is when we start to do something and the guys automatically move on to the next thing because they know what's coming without me saying a single word. Or like we do, I don't get super extravagant with my warm-up stuff, like if we do a band warm-up or we do a dynamic warm-up or we do like station warm-up, whatever that might be, but if I call out an exercise, then the guys will give each other coaching cues about that exercise. There's like it'll just echo across the room. Hey, make sure we're doing this.
Yeah.
without me having to say a single thing.
Yeah.
That's like my most, like, it's one of like the highest accomplishments I feel it when I'm training a group is when they're doing that.
What do you think, Nick?
Once the players, this kind of goes along with Logan just said, but I'm thinking more so like in the heat of the lift. Like if you walk in, like you've walked into someone who's just like kind of going through the lift and you just see them doing whatever, but then you've walked in on someone who like trains hard with intent each and every rep and pushes themselves very hard. Like to me, a well-run program is going to have almost all racks, and you're going to have guys on every rack that are pushing the envelope with what they're doing, no matter what the like purpose of the lift is. Like say it's technique. Okay. We're hammering technique. Say it's bar speed. We're hammering bar speed. Say we're hitting weight. Like we got to push a lot of weight. Like to me, they are mimicking whatever you told them to do, like prior to the lift. Like, hey, I need absolute intent here. I need the most bar speed possible. When you get to those working sets, you can see every single rack driving that bar as fast as they can. Like that to me is like they're starting to kind of take in the coaching, and then that's well run. Like they know what
they understand the intent of the session.
Yeah. I think that's when training gets fun, is when they understand the intent by listening to you in the beginning and then applying it when they're supposed to, and actually caring and trying as hard as possible. That to me is like the most important thing when I try to reiterate, especially to high school kids, because like high school kids, a lot of them don't know what actual hard work is. They think they're working hard, but I'm there to say, you got to push a little bit harder, bud. So that's me. That's kind of what I go after with the high school kids.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be about weight,
Yeah. And I think like, I agree. And I think that's where, like, as a coach, if you're the one who's always like leading the thing from the front, it's never going to work, because they have to figure it out. Like they have to be the ones that are owning it and driving it. And then the more, not that you want to just let them roll, but like as a coach, that you have to step back a bit after you've done your part of explaining it visually with your words, and then step back a little bit, let them go, give them feedback, let them go, give them feedback, let them go. But like, let them figure out what they want.
And that's good coaching. And
Yeah.
That's good coaching across the board, because like for your own sanity, you can't constantly be babysitting and bickering at them. No, it's not, it's a terrible word, I suppose, but like just constantly like hawking them.
Well, you have to manage your own energy level.
Every single session, and never let them take ownership of anything.
Yeah.
For you personally, and then for them also, like they need to be able to, like, that's what sport is. Sport isn't. They need to be able to control the control the controllables, and then have accountability for what they're doing, not only in the weight room, but like obviously in their sport. So why wouldn't we try to teach them as much as we can, so that ultimately happens, where they kind of run themselves.
Yeah. I was thinking about this too, because like something that drives most coaches nuts is like programming, putting weights on the card, and then kids not following it. And traditionally it's kids not doing the weight, like by going lighter. But at the same time, it's like everybody wants, disciplined teams with, that pay attention to details. But like if you have 220 on the card and a kid, you see it in warm-ups, it's like it'll say 130 and kid puts a plate on. No, it says 135. So I think it takes a team to be like, hey, like we follow this, on both ends. Like, because it's like, do I care if they go above? No. I mean, yes, but no. But like, you want them to pay attention to like what they need to do. It's like you don't just throw a dartboard and say, oh, Billy's gonna squat 350 today. Like you have it on for a reason.
Yeah. What, like I've had it both sides, where it says a certain weight on the bar to put on the bar, but they don't they go way less. Yeah. I've had it the other way, where they go way too heavy, and like the intent, like Nick was saying, the intent of the session is bar speed. Yes. So you just went 30% above what I told you to go, and you move the bar slow. Like that's not what we're trying to accomplish. Yeah. But if you, like I said, if you guys walked in the room and saw my session tomorrow, like I'm working off of a relative max. I'm not working off of what their true max is. So some guys will ask me in like the last 2 sets, like, hey, can I go 5? Hey, can I go 5? You know, and so now, and sometimes I'll say yes, sometimes I'll say no, you know, but they understand themselves, like, oh, I'm pushing this is really easy for me today.
Yeah.
You know, or
I
this is,
think that's yeah.
hey, can I go down?
Yeah.
You know, so you got it on both sides.
I think that's how you know, like we talked a little bit about how you know if it's going well or not. I think that's a big way. It's like that's how, if I saw like part of my staff getting like questioned by the kids of like, hey, can I go up, or like, hey, can I go down? I knew it was going well, just because that means they respect them and like they trust that they're smart enough to help them, you know? So if it says 225 and the kid says, hey, like, it feels good, can I go up? Yeah, sure. Or no. Like, but that's, you know, that's a way that, you know, the sessions and the training is going well overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing to add to that too is like, say you say like, no, like you can't go up.
Yeah.
If they trust you, they're not going to like, you know, kind of throw a fit or something like that though, because they want to go up. They want to like ego, you know, but like if you say no, and then maybe explain to them, like
Yeah.
explaining it to them and be like, hey, like I had a kid ask me the other day, because we're hitting like 85 and I'm back off next week and go up the week after. And
5%.
I had to, what?
85%.
Yeah, 85%, and we'll back off. And then we're going to go on the last week of the summer basically and see like how we feel. And I explained that to him. I was like, hey, like, cause he is already above and he had asked me to go up. And I was like, let's just cap it off here. Cause I could see like how far or how fast the bar was moving at a certain percentage. I was like, let's cap it off here, like work the plan. We know we got this and next week. And then that on the last week we can go. And he's like, okay, sounds good. And then he just like crushed his last set. So I think part of it is like coming from the coach too. If you explain like what you're laying out for him, that also builds the trust too.
I think that'd be a good topic to talk about next time too. Like Logan and I have talked about it quite a bit, but like training maxes and like how often heavy lifting should happen. Like, you know, like, cause it's way less, I think, like even now, since I've been not coaching, it's like, I think it's even less than I thought, which is a little weird, but just something like that to talk about too.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk about hiring people as well next time.
Oh,
We only got 2 minutes left, and I was really up for that.
You wanted that one?
did I put that in there?
Yeah. I haven't never really hired anyone, so I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah, but you've been hired several times,
So, you know,
so you know.
Fair enough. Been on one side.
anything else? Or are we done?
We got 2 minutes. Closing remarks, Mike.
Oh, I don't got nothing. I think that was good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to the two listeners to this podcast. You got at least 9 more episodes coming, so stay tuned.
Yeah. 9 more episodes as long as we all don't hate it. So thanks.
Are we doing this every other week? So it'd be